We know Vikings as raiders and warriors. What we don't talk about is what happened after the battle ended. When the axes fell silent and the shield walls broke, the real horror began. Not for the dead warriors. Their suffering was over. For their wives, for their daughters, for every woman left breathing in a conquered place. What Vikings did to them makes death look like mercy. You think you know Viking brutality? The sagas only whisper what came next. If you value real Viking and Norse history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment which city you're listening from. This script is based on research, with sources from Ibn Fodlan's accounts and archaeology from Dublin slave markets. Now, back to the story. 845. The monastery at Clonmacnoise falls to Tregis and his fleet. 43 monks die defending the altar. The chronicler writes about the slaughter. Then he stops writing about the women. But we know. We have the chains. Digs at Dublin's Wood Quay revealed the Viking slave market. Iron shackles sized for women's wrists. Rings for children's ankles. Warehouse floors built for holding human cargo. The Dublin Vikings didn't just raid for silver and gold. They raided for flesh. A captured wife had value, not as a person, but as property. The prices were set. 20 silver for a young woman, 15 for a mother, 10 if she was injured in the capture. These prices are carved on runic stones found in Schleswig. Actual receipts written in stone. But here's what the sagas don't say. Being sold was the lucky end. In 862, Vikings sacked the settlement at Port Merrick. The Irish annals record 47 warriors killed. They record nothing about the 53 women found in the longhouses. But the bog soil nearby tells another story. 23 bodies, all women, all showing signs of brutal violence before death. The violence wasn't random. It followed patterns. Skull fractures from behind, cuts on arms from defense, broken ribs from long beatings. These weren't battle deaths. These were executions. Slow ones. Carbon dating shows the deaths were within days of the raid. The women didn't die fighting. They died after surrender, after being taken, after the Vikings had time to decide their fate. The choice was always the same. 871. The great heathen army captures Reading. Anglo-Saxon writers record King Ethelred's defeat. They don't write what happened to the royal women. But digs at the old Saxon palace show it. Stones in the ground stained with iron from blood, enough for dozens of people. Viking war culture had rules, very strict rules. A dead man's wife became property of his killer, not as a servant, as a wife. Forced marriage by conquest. The Old Norse word was kona, own woman. Property that breathes. Law codes from 9th century Iceland describe the process. The captor declares ownership in front of others. The woman has no voice, no choice, no escape. The marriage is legal. The children from it are legitimate. The act is made law. The Graga's codes even gave time limits. The claiming must happen within 3 days of capture. After that, other warriors could fight for her. Men fought over women like they were livestock. But forced marriage was not the worst fate. 878. Norsemen attacked the monastery at Banganger. The annals record its total destruction. What they don't record is the ritual after. Digs at other sites show burn layers full of bones, female bones arranged in patterns. Viking funeral customs demanded sacrifice. When a great warrior died, his things burned with him, his horses, his weapons, his women. Ibn Fodlan saw this on the Volga in 921. He described the ritual killing of a slave girl at her master's funeral. One witness, one account. But archaeology confirms it happened often. Bones in boat burials show the same pattern. Female skeletons with marks of strangulation. Traces of drugs in teeth showing they were drugged first, made to obey. The killings were careful. The drugs came from plants. Henbane seeds found in burials, enough poison to cause visions and compliance. The women died seeing illusions. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe it was worse. 907. The great army winters at Thetford. English writers record the usual. Cattle stolen, churches burned. They don't write what happened inside the camp, in the followers' quarters. But we know. The garbage piles tell us. Infant bones, dozens of them, all showing signs of killing. These were not stillbirths. These were murders. The children of forced unions between Viking raiders and captive women. Unwanted proof of systematic assault. The methods were quick. Blows to the skull. Clean. Efficient. The bones show
This wasn't emotional violence. This was procedure. Viking law was clear about mixed-blood children. If the mother was a slave, the child was a slave. If the mother was property, the child was property. If the child couldn't work, the child died. Simple economics. The Domesday Book records this practice continuing into Norman times. Whole villages in Yorkshire show population gaps where women should be. The gaps match exactly with known Viking settlement patterns. Correlation is not proof unless you dig up the bones. Mass graves near Repton tell the story. The Viking Great Army's winter camp of 873 to 874. 249 skeletons and carefully arranged burial chambers. Only 63 are female. The ratio is wrong. Women don't just vanish, unless they are shipped away. Isotope tests of the female bones reveal the truth. These women weren't locals. They came from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, captured lands, brought back as cargo. The ones in the graves were the lucky ones. They died of sickness or childbirth, natural causes. The unlucky ones disappeared into the slave trade. Viking Age Dublin wasn't just a trading post, it was a hub for human trafficking. Ships arrived weekly with fresh captives. The women were sorted by age and condition. The young ones went to Norse towns as breeding stock. The older ones went to Islamic markets through the Russian river routes. Wood tests of Dublin's harbor posts showed non-stop rebuilding from 841 to 970. 60 years of growth. The slave trade was booming. Each new pier meant more space, more human cargo. The warehouses held up to 200 people at once. Stone floors show drains, not for rain, but for human waste. These weren't short stops. They were long-term prisons. 9th century Arabic texts describe Viking slave caravans reaching Baghdad. The women sold for high prices in Eastern markets. Fair-skinned Germanic and Celtic women were rare luxuries. The Vikings knew their buyers. They supplied them well. If you value real Viking and Norse history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment which city you're listening from. Now, back to the story. The eastern route ran through Novgorod and Kiev, 1,000 miles along the Dnieper River. Ship records carved in runes list people as cargo next to furs and amber. 20 women per ship. Standard load. But the worst fate wasn't slavery. It wasn't forced marriage. It wasn't ritual killing. It was what happened to the women who fought back. 914. Irish forces retake Dublin from the Norse. The Annals of the Four Masters describe the liberation. They don't describe what they found outside the walls, in the execution grounds. New digs reveal punishment pits, stone-lined holes made for slow dying. The skeletons show clear injuries. Broken legs so escape was impossible. Broken arms so suicide was impossible. These women were kept alive as they died. The pits measured 6 feet deep by 3 feet wide, too narrow to lie down, too shallow to stand. The victims died crouched for days, sometimes weeks. Viking laws describe the penalty for a slave who kills or injures her master. Burial alive, but not quick burial. The pit was deep enough to trap, but shallow enough for air. The victim died from thirst or cold, sometimes after weeks. Digs confirmed this wasn't theory. Soil tests from the pits show long decay times. These women died slowly, by design. The punishment had types. Some pits filled with sharp stones, others with standing water. The goal wasn't only death, it was pain, public pain. Other captives watched. They learned. 914. Norwegian King Harald Fairhair takes full control. The civil wars end. Viking raids slow, but the slave trade stays. Peace didn't stop it. It made it bigger. The routes became steady. The supply became reliable. Viking traders could promise dates for people like goods. This appears in Byzantine trade papers, standard contracts for human cargo. The Rus-Byzantine Treaty of 944 lists slave prices by type. Young women sold high. Pregnant women sold cheap. Children under 10, almost worthless. The market was organized. 937. The last big Viking raid in Ireland ends at Brunanburg. 5 kingdoms unite and defeat the Norse. They win big. What they find in the Viking camps changes history. Portable breeding pens, iron frames built to hold people during travel, chains sized for children, mobile slave markets moving with the army. War wasn't just for land, it was for people. The pens were modular. They joined together into big compounds for long-term holding. They came apart for fast travel. The design was neat, clever, and terrible. Each pen held 12 adults or 20 children. Iron rings fixed into wooden beams made anchor points. For
chains, the wear marks show constant use. This wasn't random cruelty. This was organized industry. The wives of dead warriors weren't just victims of war. They were the goal, living resources to be taken, processed, and shared. The Viking economy ran on forced labor, female forced labor. Digs of Viking towns showed the same pattern. Every big town had holding places. Every port had processing centers. The system was everywhere, hiding in plain sight. 954. Eric Bloodaxe dies at Stainmore. The last Viking kingdom in England falls. But the slave trade stays. Christian kingdoms take over the system. They don't end it. They rebrand it. Monastery records show many indentured women after Viking defeats. These weren't free contracts. These were remaimed slaves. Women first taken by Vikings now serving Christian lords. The names changed. The reality didn't. 966. Harold Hardrada dies at Stamford Bridge. The Viking Age ends in England. But digs from this time show something darker. Mass graves of women match Viking defeats. When Viking power broke, the proof had to be hidden, the witnesses had to die. But here's what changes everything. Digs at Repton found a grave sealed in 986. 236 bodies, all female, all executed the same way. But tests show they weren't captives. They were Norse women. The date matches the fall of Viking power in England. English armies were winning. Norse towns were falling. These women weren't enemies. They were Viking wives and daughters killed so they wouldn't be captured. The methods were the same as used on slaves. Blows to the head, strangling, poison. The Vikings used their own cruelty on their own families. They knew what capture meant. Soil tests show the killing took days. This wasn't panic. It was planned. Fathers killing daughters, husbands killing wives, to spare them from the same horrors they had done to others. The chronicles say nothing. The sagas are silent, but the bones don't lie. When defeat came, Vikings killed their own women rather than let them face the fate they knew too well. The Repton grave held one more detail, a runic carving on a skull. 3 words in Old Norse, "I'm better this way." Someone took time during mass killing to carve an excuse. Even in murder, they wanted to be right.
The skull belonged to a girl, 12 to 14 years old, born in Norway, brought to England as a child, killed by her own people to stop her capture. The carving was made after death.
Someone wanted her to understand. But Viking sexual violence was not just raids, it was law. The Grey Goss codes from Iceland give exact rules. The captor had to claim a woman in public with 3 witnesses. The woman's refusal did not matter. If she killed herself, the captor could demand silver from her family. Suicide was theft of property. The fine was 40 silver marks, more than a man earned in a year. 978. Ethelred becomes king of England. His first decree talks about Viking slave trade, not to stop it, to tax it. Records from London show duties on human cargo, 5 silver per woman, 2 per child. The English were not shocked by Viking practices. They wanted Viking profits. Shipwrecks along the North Sea prove how big it was. The holds were built for people, air vents for breathing, water storage for weeks at sea. Not improvised, purpose-built. The biggest ship found could carry 80 people in chains. The wood dates it to 912. Burn marks show it sank in fire. 80 women died, chained below deck. But some women fought back. 923, a woman named Gunhild appears in Frankish records, a freed Norse captive. She led raids against Viking camps. She knew their tricks, their weak spots, their fears. Gunhild's war lasted 7 years. Records say she destroyed 12 Viking camps and freed over 300 captives. She copied Viking methods, surprise raids, no prisoners, no mercy. Her last raid hit the slave market at Rouen. Reports say every Viking trader there was killed, 47 men. The method was the same each time, castration first, then bleeding to death. Gunhild disappears from the records after 930, but burned lairs at Viking sites along the Seine match her time. Someone was hunting Vikings, someone who knew how to hurt them. The practice of taking women spread outside Scandinavia. Norman writers in the 11th century note the same customs in England. William's knights were given land. The grants listed all property, women included. The Domesday Book records it clearly. Manor entries list livestock, grain, and female dependents in the same lines. Property lists treated women like farm tools, valuable, but
replaceable. Digs in Norman castles show the setup this needed. Castle yards had cells built just for women. Stone walls, iron doors, no windows. Some held 30 people at once. Bone tests from castle trash show infant deaths near 100%. The children of forced unions didn't live long. This wasn't neglect. This was policy. Mixed blood children were proof of rape, proof that became risk. 1066. Harold Godwinson dies at Hastings. England falls to the Normans. But the Norman conquest copied Viking ways exactly. Captured Saxon women forced into marriage with Norman knights. Legal tricks that turned rape into marriage. Writers of that time said it was civilizing Saxon blood. Today we would call it ethnic cleansing by sexual violence. The methods were the same as Viking practice. The excuse was different. Marriage papers from this time show the money side. Saxon heiresses were highly priced by Norman men, not for love, for land rights. Rape became a tool to transfer property. The woman's choice did not matter. Church records show resistance, Saxon women choosing death instead of marriage. Convents grew 3 times larger after Hastings. Suicides rose among noble women. The church called it martyrdom. The state called it destruction of property. But the worst proof comes from modern DNA. Tests on medieval graves show mixing that matches rape campaigns. Celtic and Saxon DNA shows up in Scandinavia from the 9th century onward. The genetic trail follows the slave routes. This wasn't cultural sharing. This wasn't migration. This was mass breeding using captured women. The DNA proves it. Systematic sexual violence across 3 centuries. Modern Icelanders carry 60% Celtic female ancestry.
Norwegians carry 40% British Isles female ancestry. These numbers mean thousands of women taken, thousands of forced births, thousands of children who never knew their mothers' names. The scale was huge. The methods were exact. The records were destroyed. But some survived. Digs at Jorvik found a hidden building, dated to 876. It had 64 small cells. Each cell had chains fixed to stone walls. This was not a jail. This was a breeding center. Soil tests show it was used for 40 years. Bone fragments show hundreds of women passed through, all female, all showing repeated pregnancies, all killed when they could not bear more. The building was in York's city center. Everyone knew. The church kept records of the children. 732 births. Only 12 lived past 5 years old. The records listed them as foundlings, sold as servants. The money built churches, God's work paid for with systematic rape. Church accounts from Yorkminster show regular payments to the operators, not bribes, not gifts, contract payments for services. The church wasn't just involved. The church was a business partner. This system repeated in Viking lands. Every big town had such centers. Every church kept such records. Every ruler took profits. The network was complete. The money was massive. The suffering was beyond words. But the darkest proof comes from new soil casts at Repton. The grave of Norse women had more than execution victims. Lower layers show burials over 50 years. Not one massacre, many. Year after year, Viking women were killed to hide the truth. Bone tests show poisoning with mercury, not quick poison, slow poison that caused madness first. The women died insane, unable to speak clearly of what they saw. Even surviving Viking women could not testify. Madness ruined their voices. Their words meant nothing in law. The perfect way to silence them. The Repton site still brings proof. Digs found children's remains with women, mothers and children killed together. Families erased so no stories survived. Tests showed these weren't random deaths. The victims were chosen. Women who spoke many tongues, women who ran slave camps, women who knew too much. They were removed. Even in death, Viking women had no choice, no voice, no escape. The Repton grave held one last sign, a runic carving on a skull. 3 words in Old Norse. Better this way. Someone took time during mass killing to carve an excuse. Even in murder, they wanted to be right. They knew exactly what awaited captured wives.